So the question as we open up the final vision, chapters 10, 11, and 12 of Daniel, that we left you with was, what is this figure who is described at some length at the beginning of chapter 10 and then returns in chapter 12 for a very significant moment at the end there? Who is this figure? What is his role? What's going on with him that makes him so different? And then the second thing is, what's the critique? What's being critiqued in this final vision? So the first question is, the first thing to notice about it is that the figure is described very differently from Gabriel. We see here that there's this lengthy set of qualities here where it says in verse 5, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, which is a sort of translucent metallic-looking rock that would reflect light internally. It would look like he has light on the inside of him. And his face like the appearance of lightning, and his eyes like flaming torches. So you can imagine all that light refracting inside of his body, sort of metallically, just a brilliant image. His arms and his legs like a gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. So that's the description of him. And again, it's very, very different from Gabriel, the way in which Gabriel has just been described. In fact, Gabriel, if anything, here we find that the angels are taking orders in a way that's unique here in this particular final vision. There's a lot of disagreement about who this is, so it's not that we can just say definitively. But there is a figure who has been mentioned earlier in the book, back in Daniel chapter 7. And in Daniel chapter 7, that figure was a divine figure coming with the clouds, and he was likened to a son of man, to a human in form, though he had qualities that made him look divine, or that were associated with God, that he rides with the clouds. And his role was to come at the time of the end and to put all things right, and to respond to the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist. And so it wouldn't be at all surprising for that figure to play a role here in the final vision, since after all, this final vision is going to be telling us quite a bit about the time of the end. That's one of the major themes of this particular vision, is the time of the end, and that expression will come up numerous times here in the vision. So just internally to Daniel, it would make sense that this figure returns from chapter 7 here now in the final vision and has some information to enlighten Daniel about what's going to happen at the time of the end. But we have something even more reliable than that, because in the book of the Revelation, I don't know if it's more reliable, but it's equally reliable. In the book of the Revelation, we have this description of John on the island of Patmos and how Jesus comes to visit him. And when he visits him, listen to the description. He says he saw one like a son of man. This is John describing Jesus. He was clothed with a long robe, a linen robe, with a golden sash, a belt around his chest. The hairs of his head were white like white wool, like snow, his eyes like a flame of fire, his feet like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace, and his voice was like the roar of many waters. The description here in the book of the Revelation is just about spot on with the description given, in this part here of Daniel, of chapter 10 of Daniel. In other words, the writer of the Revelation, John, is describing Jesus in this, that he appeared to him, and he looks to be in the same appearance as what Daniel saw in chapter 10. So that gives me a sense of confidence that that John is very deliberately describing Jesus in the same way that Daniel's vision describes this figure he saw in chapter 10, who was the one who came on the clouds of heaven in chapter 7, which Jesus directly applies to himself, by the way, in Matthew chapters 24 and also 26. Jesus uses that verse in Daniel 7 and applies it to himself. So all this is why I myself think of this figure as being the divine figure of Jesus and being separate from Gabriel and all the other angels, Michael and so on. Now, some people will say, well, this couldn't be the Messiah, that figure, because it says very specifically that he's warring with the Prince of Persia, angelic Prince of Persia, and that he needs the help of Michael to come alongside him and help him. And so Jesus, or the Messiah, would never need this sort of help. A divine figure wouldn't need some help from an angel or what have you. But actually in the scriptures, it's not uncommon for God to say that he relies upon the help of Israel to come alongside him and fight in his battles, as Deborah says in Judges, in the book of Judges. She speaks of how the people of Israel did not come to the help of the Lord. So it's not uncommon really in the Old Testament to use this kind of language, in that God would sort of condescend to allowing himself to be helped in order for us to come alongside, to help him. Now, that's who I think anyways is the figure, and he plays a very special role, and then he's going to stand up to give assurance to Daniel and to strengthen Daniel. Now, this gets us to what is being critiqued. Now, just a reminder that in the book of Daniel, the final two chapters, or rather two visions, are a pair. They both concern responses to the reading of books. In chapter 9, it's the book of Jeremiah that Daniel has been reading, and in chapter 10 to 12, it's called the Book of Truth. So that these books, the books of the prophets of Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, and then the Book of Truth, are being interpreted and revealed through these visions. So that's one way in which they line up. Another way is that they're both in response to prayer. In chapter 9, of course, is the very lengthy prayer that Gabriel then comes in response to. And in chapters 10 to 12, at the beginning, Daniel is fasting, and he's praying during the festival of the Passover. If you look at the dates, it's during the festival of the Passover. And he is appealing to God in his old age for Israel to be restored, and so this vision comes as a response to that. So in that sense, the two are a pair. And why is that important? Well, because in chapter 9, the critique was a critique of the city of Jerusalem in its response to the prophet Jeremiah. And they had 70 years to respond, and Daniel was praying that the nation would repent and be prepared for the restoration, and he sensed they weren't ready for that. When you get to come to chapters 10 to 12, we see that the focus is once again on the people, the saints who occupied Jerusalem in a kind of partial restoration, and their response to the vision of the Book of Truth, which will be unfurled in chapters 10 to 12. And if we look just at this little theme as you start Daniel 10 to 12, a theme involving the word stand, that when the vision first comes, Daniel falls to the ground, and then the figure says, as he puts his hand, he touches him, and he says, Daniel, stand upright. Stand upright. You need to stand up and be responding appropriately to the vision. And Daniel sort of comes to his hands and his knees, and he's told to stand. And then we're told that the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me. In the Hebrew is as it looks like in English. It means to stand against me. There's opposition standing against us, so we need to stand up and be prepared to fight, because this revelation is concerning a great conflict. You see it right here. It's concerning a great conflict. So we need to be standing and ready to fight. And when this figure comes, who's got eyes like with lightning coming out, and his legs are burnished bronze, bronze that's been refined by fire, He is a figure who's come to fight. He is a warrior and a judge. And he has come to stand against the forces of evil and to stand for righteousness. And he needs Daniel to stand up and join him. So you get that theme running through there. Daniel chapter 11, verse 1, I stood up, says this figure in the first year of Darius the Mede, to confirm and strengthen him, meaning Michael. This figure has stood up to strengthen him. And then in chapter 12, as you get to the beginning of chapter 12, it says, right here, it says, at that time shall arise Michael, at the time of the end. But to arise here in Hebrew means to stand up. It's another example. And then, of course, the final words here of the book, go your way till the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of days. So this emphasis on standing, that the response to the vision is actually half of the vision. So if we're looking at chapter 10 here and 11 here and 12 here, most of chapter 12 is about standing up in response to the vision. Most of chapter 10 is about getting Daniel to stand up and be ready for the vision. Chapter 11 is where you actually get the vision. So just to say that you have a considerable amount of the vision is actually focused on the response to the vision and how that revelation of the truth is meant to strengthen the believers and to give them courage to face the difficulties they're going to face by announcing it ahead of time and providing some framework and orientation for that. For next time, the question is, given that there is a great conflict, as you see in chapters 10 to 12, there's a lot of description of the military campaigns between the king of the north, the Seleucid kings, and the kings of the south, the Ptolemaic kings, both Greek empires, the vestiges of Alexander the Great's empires, warring against one another. The king of the north, Seleucus, up in Antioch, the king of the south, Ptolemaeus, down in Alexandria, Egypt, and then warring against one another. The question is, what does any of that might any of that have to do with a river? You see here the reference to the river Tigris, the Great River, as it's called here, the Great River, Tigris. And then that's not the only place that you see that. There are these other references to rivers in the narrative. Now, I'm not going to point them out because I want you to read it closely and see where the other references are to a river. Now, just because the word river isn't used doesn't mean there's not references to a river. So you're going to try and figure out where are the other references to a river. And of course, there's an explicit one at the end of the book here where right here, above, who was above the waters of the stream or of the river that Daniel's beside, the Tigris. So that's an explicit, reference, but there's ones in between there as well. So why all this description of a river? Okay, so find the descriptions. What's their value? What do they mean? And also, I would highly recommend you read Isaiah 8. Isaiah chapter 8 is also a good background to describe why a river is such an important metaphor in these chapters. And then the other thing you want to look at is this introduction of the conflict between angels and what are called princes, the prince of Persia, the prince of Israel, Michael, the prince of Greece. These are rulers, meaning angelic rulers, heavenly rulers. Why are they suddenly being described as part of this conflict? Whereas they haven't been a focus of in the book, in the previous visions in the book, now in the final vision, we see actual angelic beings at war and the divine figure engaged in a heavenly conflict with these figures. What does that add to our understanding of what's happening in the visions? So, best wishes, and we'll see you next time.